So welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here and being present for our November 29th webinar. This webinar is titled Sharing Power with Students in Counselor Education, Decolonizing Our Relationships. My name is Dr. Marlon Johnson. I am the chair of the Professional Development Committee. And with us tonight will be Professor and Program Chair of the Ohio State University's Counselor Education Program, Dr. Khaled Dollarhide. So a couple of things while we are getting ourselves settled for this evening. We will have this presentation for about an hour. And so I'll encourage you all to make sure that your screens are muted, that you can have your camera on, but just make sure that your microphones are muted throughout this presentation. If there are questions that come up, I'll be moderating the chat, but you are welcome to unmute as questions come up. We'll ask you all to first use the chat, and I will catch those questions as they come as well. But of course, this is a really welcoming and warm conversation, so we want you all to feel ready and prepared to share as things are coming up and as our presenter inquires the hive mind that's here tonight. Okay. Of course, this is also a continuing education event, so near the end of our time tonight, I will put our webinar survey inside of the chat. Please make sure that you complete it to its entirety so that we can make sure that you get credit for attending tonight's webinar. And of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to add them into the chat, okay? So I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Khaled Dollarhide. So Dr. Khaled Dollarhide is a professor and program chair for Counselor Education and the Associate Chair for the Department of Educational Studies at The Ohio State University. She has been a counselor educator for 28 years and a counselor for 33, and is an ACA Fellow of the class of 2022. She is a cisgender, able-bodied, straight middle-class woman with a highly diverse family, and she strives to be a lifelong learner about whiteness, social justice, privilege, oppression, and psychological and systemic liberation, while she works to be a co-conspirator, disruptor, and servant leader. She has published over 50 national articles and has served as an editor of the Journal of Humanistic Counseling and special issues co-editor of Professional School Counseling and CES, as well as presented over 150 times at conferences and gatherings on social justice, leadership, supervision, school counseling, pedagogy, and professional identity, all through a qualitative research lens. In the past, she has served as the president of the Association of Humanistic Counselors and the president of Counselors for Social Justice, as well as a co-founder of the Ohio Counselors for Social Justice. So, without further ado, Dr. Dollarhide, it is all your show. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I really appreciate being here, and I very much appreciate all of you for being here too. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and I hope that it'll be a conversation that continues. This is by no means to say that there are answers. We're just formulating ideas. We're all going to be trying our own strategies for decolonizing. So this is just basically I hope, a means of generating interest and generating more conversation about this topic. And I do very much invite comments or questions as we're going, whether you want to put them in the chat and let Dr. Johnson kind of share, or if you feel like unmuting yourself, feel free to do that. I do have a PowerPoint, and Dr. Johnson, I believe, is going to drop it in the chat so that you have a copy of the slides that we're going to take a look at in case that's helpful for you. You know, some people are visual learners and others are more auditory. So, you know, if it's helpful, then it will be there for you. I'm going to share my screen. And the part that is unfortunate about the sharing of my screen is that means I don't get a chance to see all of your faces very clearly. So I'm hoping that I can clean this up and get it actually to cooperate. There we go. Can you see that? See the slides? Yeah. Okay, great. So this is a workshop that was put together with in collaboration with the Counselor Education and Supervision Committee of CSJ. So there is a committee that is working on issues related to social justice within counselor ed itself. And so this webinar is an outgrowth of those conversations. I always feel it is important to acknowledge several things at the beginning of every one of my presentations. One is a land acknowledgement that the land where we all occupy today has served as a site of meeting and exchange among this region's indigenous people for many, many centuries, long before people who look like me arrived on these shores. This ground is not our ground, and this land is not our land. For more than 500 years, the First Nations and Native communities have demonstrated resilience and resistance in the face of efforts to separate them from their land, culture, and each other. And they are at the forefront of movements to protect Mother Earth and the life it sustains. This will always be First Nations land, and so we need to recognize our responsibility for educating ourselves about colonialism and about our continued role in perpetuating oppression. It's also important to me to acknowledge the labor that much of what we know of this country, including its culture, economic growth, and development throughout history and across time, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans, their ascendants and the descendants, those who suffered the horror of transatlantic trafficking, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. As a nation, as a culture, we are indebted to their labor and sacrifice, and acknowledge the tremors of violence that move throughout the generations and the resulting impact that is still felt and witnessed today. And then finally, as a result of COVID, we acknowledge the unnamed essential workers who labor for low wages and poor working conditions, who maintain our economic, educational, and social systems as we know them. We thank them and advocate for equitable systems of pay, benefits, and appreciation for all those who serve in essential positions. I wanted to start our conversation on those pillars of acknowledgement because we do not take the time to do that in our culture and in our classrooms. So that, for me, is one example of a way to begin the decolonizing process, is to start out. I start out every class at the beginning of every semester and every meeting that I'm in, that I chair, with that acknowledgement in order to bring that awareness into the room. So as Dr. Johnson mentioned, I'm Colette Dollarhide. I'm the co-chair for the CSJ Committee on Counselor Education and Supervision. And I'm also a full professor at Ohio State. And my email, I'm sorry, it got a little funky there, but it's dollarhide.1@osu.edu in case you would like to email me to further the conversation, or if you have anything to contribute or any comments about tonight's discussion, I would welcome that communication. So tonight, we're going to talk about power dynamics in faculty-student relationships. We're going to talk about the damage that's done to students through educational wounds, And then we're going to talk about empowering students and confronting abusive pedagogical and programmatic systems in counselor ed. I do want to just state my positionality, why this is important to me, why I care. I've been in education. I had to count it up using all my fingers and toes because it's been over 40 years that I've been in education in a variety of different capacities. In my graduate experience, I had a very abusive advisor. I blamed myself for that relationship, not understanding what I did wrong. And over the years, I've been on 5 different campuses, and I've seen a lot of different ways that faculty engage with students, and some of it healthy, some of it unhealthy. But all of it can be improved by decolonizing our classrooms, our way of thinking about education, and by confronting the abusive systems if we encounter them. I don't want to make it sound as if it is a foregone conclusion that every program, for some reason, I cannot get rid of these floating controls. So I keep trying to get them to hide, and they just won't go away. So I apologize if you all can see. Oh, there they are again. So I'm just going to ignore them now. So there are a variety of ways that the power dynamics within counselor education become manifest. And faculty power is important to recognize. So it starts, I hope you can see the screen. I'm not sure if you can or not, because the screen is, yeah, okay. Faculty hold all the cards. They are the ones evaluating dispositions and goals in the admissions process. At that point, they're making assumptions about people's education, about their intelligence, their ability to be successful, their mental health. But the potential for bias is huge, misunderstanding, the perpetuation of stereotypes. Mm-hmm. It continues through coursework and through field experience, and the spacing is just terrible on the slide. It wasn't until just now, so I have no idea why it's gotten larger and harder to read. Anyway, during coursework and during field experience, students are also being evaluated in terms of, how well do they take a direction? Can they follow APA rules? Can they engage helpfully in classes? Are there, again, the potential for misunderstanding and the potential for abusive dynamics are throughout this entire process. You add supervision, and then you add, additional input from multiple other supervisors and persons in authority, and the student is placed in a potential position to just being bombarded with all sorts of messages about whether or not they're adequate, whether or not they're doing it right, whether or not they're doing it well. And doing it right is always defined in terms of white hegemony, right? So all of the traditions and assumptions within counseling are based on white, European, North American, male, straight, cisgender, et cetera, assumptions about engagement, learning, and about mental health. So all of the systems now are coalescing frequently in opposition to ways that the student may feel to be most healthy. And then you add graduation and licensure and the competition for jobs, for statements like, you can't get a job in this town without my recommendation. Statements like, if you don't perform the way I expect you to perform, then you will not graduate. Meaning all this money, all this time, the resources have all been wasted and spent for nothing. So the entire cycle is set up for faculty power. And that faculty power has traditionally been white, cisgender, straight, male, etc. And then, of course, you add all of the additional stressors, the performance stress that people may feel, the personal stress related to finances, relationships, the different ways of engaging family, etc., academic stress, and it is tremendous pressure on our students, leaving them exhausted, drained, demoralized, frustrated, and ready to give up. So, when we perpetuate this cycle of fear and control, what kind of counseling will such a person be able to provide? A person whose training has been completely immersed in fear and control. And that person is going to struggle then with how to make the transition into a professional identity where ambiguity is the groundstone of our work. And in such a system like this, the way we have it, most students struggle with their own internal sense of voice because their voice has been squashed and silenced and shamed in their graduate program and potentially throughout their K-12, K-16 experience. So I term it educational wounds because I believe that all throughout our education, our students are victimized by the dynamics of people in power for whom nothing is good enough, nothing will ever be good enough, students will never be good enough. And this chronic sense of inadequacy because they've been working since they were 5 years old to succeed academically. And then especially considering how historically minoritized students are targeted for microaggressions. I did a research study talking to African-American school counselors, and they talked about parents, teachers, colleagues, administrators who targeted them with microaggressions. So how much more microaggression, macroaggression, macro assault do our young people experience? And the research is very clear that it's significant. Hearing things like, you'll never make it, you come from inferior stock. I've heard that sentence actually spoken. And it becomes even more intense during graduate study because the stakes are higher. People are sacrificing more. They're sacrificing current earning for future earning. They're sacrificing current relationships to have more healthy or more satisfying future relationships. And so they're sacrificing a lot to be in our classes with us. And yet they're in environments that is simply more of the same abusive dynamic or less than healthy dynamic. So I think it operates on a continuum that, on the one end, there are individuals who create and sustain healthy relationships with students, yes. But my concern is that because it is a continuum, when you look at that perhaps bell curve, that you've got 2% of individuals who have healthy relationships and 2% who may be egregiously abusive. And then in the middle, there are a lot of people who are unaware of the effect they have on their students, or if they are aware, they don't care, or they believe that that's the way it needs to be. I had to do it, you have to do it. That's hazing. That's not educational quality. That's hazing. So it leaves students where they become very needy, they become fearful, they're compliant at any cost in order to graduate, in order to be in favor. But are there things that you have also seen, behaviors you've seen as a result of this abusive dynamic? If anybody has any examples, please feel free to unmute yourself.
I actually came out of an abusive graduate program a couple of months ago, and it was really bad. And that's why I'm here. I was wondering what can be done with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I can appreciate that. I just had a conversation with a colleague just recently, and she was referring to, you know, kind of made a joke about PTSD from her doctoral experience. And I'm like, that's not funny. That's horrible. And if, you know, if your experience from even just a couple months ago, you're still probably processing a lot of what you had to survive. So I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah, I've just certainly encountered myself, and that as a member of CSJ, when we started to get teeth and bite back against what we saw as being injustice, I have no proof, but what I definitely sensed, there was a lot of resources that were devoted to alternative organizations that were more faculty-led as a way of kind of indirectly quelling that and potentially cutting off people becoming members of CSJ as well.
Wow. That's very overt. It sounds like it was very, very strategic in ways of preventing people from participating in these conversations. Mm-hmm.
Ian, I believe we came out of the same program.
Yeah. Well, whether your experience was the same as mine, I don't know, but if you can corroborate or you have a difference with that, I'd be interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah. I know after the abusive dynamic of my graduate program, we joked about, you know, creating an adult children of, and it was the name of the advisor, that you know, we were joking about needing support, you know, weekly support meetings, because I frequently left class in tears with a feeling like there was a target on my back. I was one of the favorite targets for the ridicule and shaming that went on in the program. So, and it, like I said, maybe I'm really, it took me years to figure out what was going on. So what I'm hoping we'll be able to do is we can't, unfortunately, go back and change what we experienced, but perhaps we can put structures in place that can prevent these things from happening to future students. We're going to talk about sharing power and decolonizing. We're going to talk about empowering students to speak about their experience in the moment, not after the fact, but hopefully trusting us to support them while disruption takes place. And then looking at the programs that we find ourselves in to look at, are there abusive classroom or programmatic dynamics that might need to be confronted and disrupted? So this is where I do not want it to sound like I have there are many, many more ideas than what I have here. This is, excuse me, for me, just kind of the start of pulling together a variety of different resources and ideas and you know, offering them for your consideration. So it's most important first to create healthy and decolonized relationships with our students that are characterized by respect, input, and autonomy as kind of the core foundation of the decolonizing process. Primarily, you know, that profound respect for the personhood of each student, And that obviously is the foundation of trust, that each individual student is cherished, is valued exactly as they are, and for all that they will become. That they don't need to meet my my conditions for approval. I offer the information with choice. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then we negotiate what our relationship is going to look like, so that people have the trust in me, trust in the process. Second, seeking input from students about how they learn, about what they've discovered about themselves, about their own knowing of their purpose here on earth, and supervision experiences, their interests, their values, all of those things. I hope students will feel comfortable sharing with me. I invite them to, and respect however that is comfortable for them. And then third, I try to let them decide as much as possible. I'm still working on this myself. I'm still a work in progress. But what I strive to do is give them choices within options, given that there are standards, given that there are, licensure issues and accreditation and those kinds of white hegemonic structures that still exist. Just so you know, I took a look at the prep materials for the NCE. Only like 7% of all those materials had anything to do with social justice. 93% of it is the white hegemonic stuff, dead white guys. So what I try to do in the delivery of the class is say, how will we meet these standards? Here are the standards. How will we meet them? And then in terms of the outcomes, I give them choices in terms of how they want to show me what they're learning. And I always try to go back to that what they're going to show me, the frame that I give them is that what I'm asking them to show me is how they're learning in a context that relates to the profession. So we talk about options and we talk about different assignments, and there are some that I just go, no, we kind of need to do this, but I try to explain why this particular assignment is one that is vital for their learning in this class. And even in that, try to give them as much choice as possible. So for example, in my social justice, multicultural and social justice counseling class, they design artifacts that allow them to talk about the learning about the community that they're interested in deepening their understanding with, and I ask them to provide a visual artifact of something related to the strengths of the community, the challenges of the community, the social justice work you would do with the community, and the advocacy that you would do for the community. So they get to choose. The structure is there, but how they meet that assignment, the community that they bring forward is their choice. So what I would recommend is that we think about, in terms of decolonizing our classrooms, two different things. One, how we teach, and then what we teach. So in terms of how we teach, building an explicitly inclusive community, articulating that this is inclusive community. I share my identities and my values programming. I invite them to share their identities and their values programming. And then, we have a starting place for engagement with each other. And mutual interdependence. They're learning from each other more than they're learning from me. And I know I'm learning from them. And I say that, and I thank them for that. And I thank them for their sharing. I thank them for their honesty. I thank them for their passion, for their compassion. So I try to help I try to help them feel that they matter, and that their presence in our community as a classroom matters. And I want them to also build relationships with their colleagues, because those collegial relationships transcend when they leave, they graduate and they're out in the field, then they're connecting with each other as a support system, as consultation system, and a supervision system for each other. And then building trust, that they trust themselves, and that they know I trust them, and that I respect them, and that I hold them in the highest esteem, so that they know that what they're contributing, I hope they feel that is valued in our discussions in the class. And then here's a challenge I have. Consider non-traditional ways of engaging in conversation. The students, ask about going outside, and can we, and I've done it a few times. But I'm very distractible, so I struggle with remaining focused on our conversation. But I know people who do it really, really well. And so going outside and varying the materials and creating different immersive experiences in the classroom. I wish I had more technology skills. I would love to do that. But, just thinking outside the box. For example, in other cultures, for example, in Hawaii, educators and kids do not, kids don't wait to raise their hand. They just simply speak. They just simply share their ideas. I hate the people feeling like they have to raise a hand. I want people to be able to be a part of the conversation. So, so consider ways that you can open up how you teach, so that it welcomes everyone into the conversation without the formality of raising hands or, I don't know, whatever. And then we also need to look at what we teach. So I know that one of the foundation ways of decolonizing the class is to make consistent, not just, oh, it's in my syllabus, not just, oh, it's one night out of the semester where I talk about one theorist who was not one of the white dead dudes, but clear and consistent references to experts in counseling, mental health, and models of healing that are not a part of the Western hegemonic, this is the way you have to look at our profession. We need to understand indigenous healing traditions and the healing traditions that come from around the globe, because the people that we are teaching represent populations from all around the globe. So we need to understand what are those healing traditions? How do people look for help? Where do they go for help? And how do we facilitate that? It also needs to be informed by historically minoritized communities self-referencing strengths and problem-solving strategies. For example, the 7 principles of Nguzo Saba by Dr. Karenga. Understanding how might those 7 principles help in, if I'm teaching a class that has historically African-American, Black students, how do I understand those cultural messages about meaning and value and participation and community, and how do I use those in a way that don't stereotype, but that offer them a way of telling me what's important to them without just assuming, without just saying, here's the curriculum, need to learn it. And then making sure that all content, assessment, careers, research, diagnosis, theories, techniques, group, all of it, every single class is infused, not just, here and there, is infused with the traditions from all of these communities, and that address a conclusion, social justice, and advocacy. Because that's the core of our profession. That's what ACA says is one of the core values of our profession. So it's not just, oh, it's taught in X class, it's in all of our classes. It characterizes our entire curriculum. That would open up what we teach to allow for the inner truths of our students to enrich all of us, where they're participating in the curriculum, in the design of our profession, in the evolution of our profession, which needs to evolve, right? So what are some additional ideas? What are some ideas that you've seen or that you've tried, that I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute so that, perhaps people can feel comfortable to unmute if you want to be able to share anything that you've tried or that you've seen.
I think somebody in the chat referenced using creative arts, which I think is really useful. But one thing I've started doing more too in teaching is allowing for different types of assignment submissions. So instead of it being written papers that are 15, 20 pages long, I now let them do like video stories or auditory recordings of themselves talking about an issue, because we're doing a lot of our profession talking and listening. So it's sometimes better to utilize those skills anyway. So I've tried to incorporate those where I can in those bigger assignments.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in some assignments, I've had students write music. Oh, that's just amazing. It's the process, not the product. At least that's the way it is for me. That, when I'm asking students to consider these ideas and think about ways that it applies to what they are going to be doing as a professional, it's the process of thinking that through and then, marrying that with their own gifts. That to me, who cares if it's spelling, whatever. It's the product, it's the process. Let's say it backwards. It's the process, not the product, to me, that matters.
I'll share here as well. So in my assessment and testing course, we often have a specific segment where we talk about crisis and trauma assessment. And that gives us a really wonderful opportunity for us to talk about what is quantified or qualified as trauma in the DSM and what's not. And that allows us to bring in conversations around racial trauma and how racial trauma, intergenerational trauma has shown up, but is not necessarily a diagnosable experience. So we talk about things like Monica Williams's work, Resmaa Menakem's work, to help people to see how trauma becomes a part of your body, how it is a part of this necessary somatic healing process, as well as a psychological process, and how we as counselors have an opportunity to help people identify and assess that work so that they move forward in healing in ways that are culturally relevant to what's going on for them. So
I love it. I love it. And what that makes me think of, Dr. Johnson, is cultural thriving. It's the healing that the student is also experiencing. And in that healing, they can then understand the healing of others and can shepherd the healing of others, as opposed to they, them, objectifying the client, the patient, but they feel it themselves. I love that. I love that. Thank you. And thank you, Ashley. I appreciated your comments also.
We had a professor, we were in a first year doc program, learning about counselor education and learning about KCREP and having a lot of interesting difficulties with it. And so our professor had decided to take it, and we did a presentation at SACES around decolonizing and destructuring the KCREP curriculum and how we teach it. And the idea of like making it more of like a longitudinal study. So like multicultural isn't just like one semester. It's kind of like tracked throughout your time as a doc student. And so we kind of burned down the system and had this whole firefighter theme. And it was just a conversation in class that our professor ended up taking and was like, let's do something with this. Like, how do we take it? And from that came a really interesting conversation around, well, who's the people who have all of the data around why we do things the way we do? And it's KCREP. KCREP tracks all of our data, has all of our information. And so now we're having conversations with KCREP around what are you doing with this data? Why don't we have access to it? You know, how are we making things the way they are, using this data to justify that? So
awesome. Awesome. I love it, Hannah. That is wonderful. Was this at the most recent SACES? Yeah, because a couple of my doc students came back and said they were at a really good session on decolonizing. And I'm like, yes, I love it. I love it. That's wonderful. So Dentavius says that he was there. Thank you. You know, that's exactly what we need. We need new eyes, new thinking, new awareness, and that together being able to literally burn it down. And I deliberately avoided using the F-bomb with that with that statement. So I'm trying to keep it on the appropriate channel here. But yes, taking such a deep look at the structure of licensure and the structure of accreditation, and asking, why are we doing it this way? Who does it serve? Because, you know, the party line has been, oh, it serves the client. It serves. Does it really? Does it really? Does it? That's what we need to challenge. So thank you. Oh, and Tina is also adding, you know, that North Central. Yeah. Darius, you know me too well. So I'm going to go back to the slides. I know the chat is just rich with all sorts of wonderful insights. So I hope that, you know, what I would recommend is just periodically save the chat, because people are, you know, their names and their ideas are there. So you might like follow, you might notice the names of some of the people on this call and realize that they've published on some of these topics. And, you know, kind of, you would be able to follow some of the really important insights that the people here have to offer. Yes, and Carly, thank you that CEs need to be decolonized also. Yeah. Why are some topics CE worthy and other topics are not? I do not know. So yeah. Thank you, Ian, for that. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to go back. How are we doing on? Oh my gosh, it's almost 8. Okay. I had no idea. I'm gonna I apologize. I thought when I stopped sharing it would come back to where we were, but it did not. Okay. There we go. Trying to get it to, okay, we'll do that. It's also important to recognize that there are programmatic, systematic, abusive structures. There are a few of them listed here, you know, forcing people to memorize minutia on high stakes exams, meaningless assignments, meaningless processes. And one might argue comprehensive exams might fall into that category. Faculty who gossip about students, who triangulate with students, playing favorites in class to maintain control and domination, and shaming students in front of class. I had my advisor tell the class that I lied on my Myers-Briggs because no one could have a score as stupid as mine. My advisor told the class that. So that kind of behavior is out and out abusive. That's an egregious example, but there are many more examples than this. The idea is the pulling of strings and forcing people to undergo traumatic kinds of experiences for what end, I do not know. So we need to discover what these abusive systems are, listening to students, asking them about their experiences, asking them, you know, how they experienced a particular process, for example, comprehensive exams, or observing their interactions between colleagues and students, and noticing what those dynamics are, and then disrupting them through empowering students, amplifying their voice, and then, if need be, take action and report. There are systems on every campus. There should be, I shouldn't say there are, there should be systems on every campus to provide support and protection for students. Title IX is just one of those, but and many campuses kind of wrap a lot of things around that Title IX office. But, you know, for example, is there a student ombuds person? Are there issues that might be taken to student government that might be elevated to a higher level of discourse on the campus about the relationships between faculty and students? And getting to know those professionals, what do they do and how do they do it, so that you can advocate for more robust systems if needed. Second, teaching students the skills for self-advocacy that involve describing behaviors, describing the impact of those behaviors, and then stating a solution or resolution. But more than anything, we need to be the safe ally. And then if needed, we need to be the advocate and disruptor if need be. It is an honor to be asked to support students in that way. And it is important that we recognize our responsibility to do so. That not saying anything means, you know, silence is colluding with the abuse. Silence enables the abuse. And we need to take that responsibility very seriously. Will there be fallout? Yeah. And I recognize that I sit in a privileged position as a full professor to say, yes, I was in a position to be an advocate for my students. And as a full professor, I was able to take that on without fear. But I recognize that that may not be the case for everyone. And so if there are tenure or other status implications, if it means relationships are fractured, if it means you're targeted for revenge, I recognize that that's the risk, but I don't think systems can be disrupted unless there is risk. And I know that each of us has different ways of tolerating that risk. But is it worth it? Yes, it is. If we say nothing, it continues. It will go on forever until it is stopped. It's important to recognize we cannot look away. We can't walk away. That if we do nothing, we are responsible. So I know that we've got about 5 minutes left. That I kind of went really fast over that last part. Because there may be more questions about disrupting. There may be questions about, what does that look like? And I'm happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Hello, Dr. Dollar. Hi, my name is Harusha. I just finished my master a few months ago. I'm a new hire in one company in suburban Chicago area. So my question, how similar or different the power dynamic between new hire versus supervisor in workplace, according to your experience? Because I assume maybe, but I don't know, because you said there is a trust, we need to be compliant. Yes, it look like similar, but what do you think of that?
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
think that there is tremendous similarity, especially for a new person joining, an existing workplace, that I recognize that the same dynamics are at play. And so, one of the things I didn't mention in here that would be germane absolutely for a new professional is mentoring. I did a session a couple of months ago in social justice mentoring, or mentoring using social justice, and looking for a mentor who supports your identity, and finding a way that mentor can provide that culturally thriving mentoring so that you thrive as a human being, as well as a professional.
Thank you. Any recommendation for books, Dr. Dollar Hyde, about this, if you can?
Oh boy, I'll have to give that some thought. But if you want to, email me,
Yeah.
I would be more than happy to kind of take a look at.
Yeah.
My books are like my children.
Yes.
So,
Thank you so much, Dr. Dollar Hyde. Yes, thank you.
okay.
One thing that I'm noticing come up with colleagues in the field that have been, I'll just say it, have been in the counseling education space for longer, sometimes struggle with some of the professionalism pieces, especially around appearance. And obviously that comes from a very, racially charged kind of setting, and thinking about how that is very much a white hegemonic structure that holds that up. But how do we challenge our colleagues, our CE colleagues, about that? Because they think that they're saying this in a way to be nice to the student. Oh, you don't want to dress up like that or show up like that to your site. But at the same time, they're also telling that student that what they're doing is not, who they're presenting themselves as is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think that is a really, really good question. And I recognize that for a lot of older colleagues, it's notions that existed years ago about what makes an appropriate presentation, as a counseling professional. And I think that is misplaced, because I think it keeps us locked in this respectability, and I know that word is charged in certain communities, presentation of similarity to white power structures. And I realized the question was about how do you confront that? And I think what one of the things that I would ask is, you know, it's real interesting that you gave that feedback to that student. How does that impact her or his work performance as a counselor? How does that impact whether or not they are a good counselor? To see whether or not they might see that disconnect? Chances are not.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I gently challenged that. And I don't want to spend too much time with this, but I gently challenged that. And they kind of waffled a bit. And then they went into, oh, safety, because they were worried about, like, you know, if a client would get aggressive with them, how that would put them at risk. And it was a very interesting dynamic that it became a safety issue all of a sudden. So yeah.
Okay. I recognize that you're relaying, but that's really, that says so much more about the person that you're describing than do you know what I mean?
I do completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a little bit of a leap there.
It is. Yeah.
You know, and the issue is connection with their community. That's, you know, that's what it should be based in, is, you know, I don't know. I've never seen anyone show up for a job interview wearing, I don't know, you know, something that was grossly inappropriate. So, I mean, people have a sense of how they want to present themselves. And I don't think we need to be the, you know, the hemline police or you know what I mean? Anyway.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I know we are right at time, so I want to respect everyone's time as well. I see there's one more question in the chat. So I'll ask Dr. Dollarhide if you have time and if others are willing to stay on just a little bit longer, if we could answer this last question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you said it was in the chat.
It is. And the
What
question
an
is,
amazing chat. Oh, what thoughts do you have when balancing the support, the supporting a student while also holding confidentiality and fear from the student as well? Hannah, would you feel comfortable saying a little bit more?
Yeah. So we had recently we've had a thing at our school where it's affected us stock students, but it's also affected master students as well. And there's been this interesting kind of like, there's been spaces provided to students for them to come talk. But I'm kind of hearing in this conversation, like, we need to say something, we need to speak up, but then also the students are fearful that they won't graduate. And it feels invalidating to tell a student, especially a student of color, you know, as someone, like, as a white woman or just like anyone that they're talking to tell them not to worry about it. Like, they can speak up, they're protected, but they've been shown time and time again that they're not protected within the academic system. And so it feels like a very fragile balance between respecting the students' wishes of, like, wanting to just have a space to process, but also knowing that this traumatizing experience is happening. And it's like, how, like, do you have any thoughts on how that, like, speaking up, but then also respecting the identities?
That one is definitely a challenge. I'm wondering if there are opportunities for confidential conversations that would remain confidential to do that processing, if there is a person who would be able to facilitate those conversations that would maintain that confidentiality. One of the challenges within a university environment is that to bring an action forward, their people, many campuses do not make it possible for someone to bring that information forward and remain anonymous, right? So if they want to bring something more formal, then they give up their anonymity. And alumni frequently are safer from those repercussive tremors that might trickle through the current students. So I don't know if there is a way to involve alumni in the conversation who might be able to bring this question forward on behalf of students, and then the alumni are the ones who are providing names, their name, not the students, but they're carrying the concerns of the students, but not naming them. I don't know if that makes sense, Hannah, or not.
No, it does make sense. I think as doc students, we spoke up, and then you could see the retaliation happen with a matter of weeks, and really innately, like just in the moment. And so I think the master students were validated in that. And I just think about working with students, like we're saying this, and it's almost like the system in which we tell, like the trial by fire system needs to be decolonized, because it's not safe for students when we continually show them time and time again that the academia is just not safe for them.
Right, exactly. The academic system is tenure is set up to protect faculty, and that is wrong. The tenure system, I'm sorry, needs to be burned down also, in my opinion. But this is also from my position. I know for many people, tenure is an important protection, but it also is fraught with this abuse. And I've seen that on multiple campuses where the tenure system protected abusers. In a word, they protected abusers. And it's, yeah, I hear you, Hannah. I hope that there are ways that that you might be able to recruit other resources, in your campus. Also, there might be a faculty or a student ombuds or student government might be able to step in or something. Deans are supposed to be a place for listening. I don't know if that's a safe place or not, but that might be another, leapfrogging over the systems that are protecting the abusers. Might mean going up to a dean or higher. I don't know if that helps or not.
This is all such rich, wonderful, communal and collective information, you all. Can we all just give some screen celebrations to Dr. Dollarhide for facilitating us through this conversation?
Thank you.
My goodness. I cannot tell you, Dr. Dollarhide, how important this work is for the future of our field. So I hope we're all listening and finding new ways to engage our own institutions and the institution of counseling and counselor ed to make it safer for people to do the work that we do. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for everything, that your attention and your willingness to be present and serve. Just to give you all a little bit of an update, you should have seen the link go out twice inside of the chat, but in order for you to acquire your continuing ed certificate, fill out the survey. We will be sending those out over the next week or so. So make sure you get those filled out. And also I want to let you know that we are coming up on a week of webinars. In fact, we have 3 different talks that are happening over the next week, and you'll see more advertisements about that in the future. So December 12th, we will talk about addressing elements of white supremacy in counselor education. December 14th, we will have a school counselor roundtable. And on December 16th, we will have FUBU, how counselor educators are intentionally decolonizing research. So in case you are wondering, yes, we are having some wonderful thematic work here at the end of our year. So stay tuned, keep your eyes out for some of those marketing materials, and for all of you, have a wonderful night.
We'll see you soon.